Bear Line, I order you to resist with your division in your positions without giving ground. My grenadiers, my pioneers, and my anti-tank gunners, they are all standing firm in the line. None of them have left their positions, none of it. They are all lying in their holes, still and mute, because they are dead." This was the response that General Bear Line of the Lehrpanzer Division gave to his superiors when on July 25, 1944, he was ordered to contain the offensive that the Americans had just started in the western sector of the Normandy front. But what was the so-called Operation Cobra? How did the dramatic breach of the German defenses in Normandy come about? Well, this is exactly what we are going to see next. In mid-July 1944, it had been almost a month and a half since the Allies had landed in Normandy. After numerous offensives and despite their efforts, they were still stuck in the sector. However, there was a key element that worked in their favor, which was the accumulation of troops and resources in Normandy. In this way, while the Allies were increasingly numerous and powerful, the Germans, who had great difficulty sending reinforcements to Normandy, were increasingly weakened. By mid-July, German intelligence services suspected that the Allies were about to launch two major offensives in the sector. One of them would be carried out by the British in the vicinity of Caen, and the other in the vicinity of St. Lo, carried out by the Americans. The depleted German divisions, including the Leibstandarte, 116th Panzer Division, Hitlerjugend, Panzerlehr, Berlichingen, 2nd Panzer Division, and Das Reich, had to be divided to try to contain the new series of Allied offensives. The first to attack were the English during the day of July 18 in the vicinity of Aum. Although Montgomery hoped to break through the German defenses once and for all, after 4 days of battle he was forced to suspend the operation, called Goodwood, after having suffered almost 6,000 casualties and a loss of 420 tanks. However, although the Germans managed to stop the British offensive, they did so at the cost of employing most of their reserve units, and by the time the Americans attacked in the St. Lo sector, they were able to send virtually no reinforcements. The forces that the Americans prepared for Operation Cobra included 8 infantry divisions and 4 armored divisions, these being the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 6th. In total, more than 100,000 infantry troops along with nearly 1,500 battle tanks and 800 light armor. The Allied plan consisted of hitting the German defenses west of St. Lo with the greatest passable force, on a front that was as narrow as passable, and once the initial defense was overcome, sneak into the German rear and dismantle the entire German defensive system in Normandy. Before launching their ground units, the Americans prepared a powerful air fleet of more than 1,000 bombers, which would devastate the German defenses. In the sector that was about to receive the massive Allied offensive were the weakened German divisions Das Reich and Berlichingen on the left flank, the Panzer Division Lehr right in the center, and the 352nd Infantry Division on the right flank. It is estimated that in total there were no more than 200 battle tanks. Operation Cobra, scheduled to launch in mid-July, had to be delayed numerous times due to bad weather. By July 24, the green light was given to the operation, and the first bombers began to take off and headed towards their objective west of St. Lo. However, shortly after, the Allied High Command decided to cancel the offensive due to reports of worsening weather. The cancellation took place once the first planes had already taken off, and it was impossible to inform many of them that the operation had been canceled. In this way, some dropped their bombs on the indicated sector, resulting in the death of 25 American soldiers along with another 130 who were injured. This was because the Allied ground units stayed close to the German ones because they did not retreat, since in theory, no bombing was going to occur. It was during the next day, July 25, when the attack finally occurred. However, and unfortunately for the Americans, the bomber fleet once again suffered another error, because the hatch of one of them broke down and dropped the bombs ahead of time, again dropping many bombs on the Allied position. On this occasion, more than 100 American soldiers were killed and 500 were wounded. Among them was General McNair, who was supervising the operation from a forward command post. In any case, and despite everything, there is no doubt that the Germans took the worst part, mainly the Panzer Division Lehr, which was located west of Saint-Lô. This unit, commanded by General Berlichingen, had been created a year earlier with the purpose of throwing the Allies who landed in France back into the sea. Although at the beginning of June, it had been one of the most powerful divisions of the German army, on July 25, after almost 2 months of continuous fighting and practically without receiving reinforcements, the Panzer-Lehr division was just a shadow of what it had been. However, at this point, everything didn't matter because it was brutally annihilated from the sky by Allied bombers. After the bombing, which took place early in the morning, at around 11 o'clock, the North American ground units began to advance through terrain full of craters. In the lead were the 2nd and 3rd Armored Division. In front of them were only the remaining 2,200 men of the Lehr Panzer Division, along with some 45 armored vehicles, which could do little or nothing against the great onslaught that came upon them. Despite the great carpet bombing that had devastated the first German defensive line in which the Panzer-Lehr Division was located, the Germans managed to reorganize and put up all the resistance they were capable of. General Collins, commander-in-chief of the 7th Army Corps, was quite discouraged when he encountered first enemy artillery fire, which they hoped to have broken up with the bombardment. Added to the impractical terrain that the bombers had left, the Allied vanguards barely managed to advance 2 kilometers during the day of July 25, although they gained good positions from which to continue advancing the next day. The Germans, who believed that the British operation in Caen had been the main one they were going to suffer that month, had not prepared their defenses as well in the sector near Saint-Lô, and practically lacked an in-depth defensive base. Although it did not affect him during the first day, his precariousness in the sector would become a problem during the following days. By the morning of the 26th, both the 2nd Armored Division and the 1st American Infantry Division joined the attack. The 2nd Armored Division attacked in a southerly direction, while the 3rd Armored Division attacked in a southwesterly direction, right in the rear of the German Das Reich and Berlichingen divisions. The Allies, little by little, began to gain ground on the Germans, who were forced to retreat. Due to the danger of being surrounded, the men of Das Reich and the Berlichingen division had to withdraw on the 28th, when in addition to being attacked from their rear and right flank, the 6th and 4th Armored Divisions attacked them from the front. While the German units retreated trying to escape the trap, the Allied aircraft attacked them non-stop, increasing the confusion. It was specifically near the city of Rancy, where a group of Allied fighter bombers destroyed a German column of dozens of vehicles of all types. The heavy casualties of the Das Reich division during their withdrawal made it impossible for them to forcefully counterattack against the vanguard of the 2nd Armored Division, which also turned southwest to try to trap the Germans. As a curiosity, one of the most notable actions during the Allied offensive was carried out by the German Panzerace Sparkman, who was able to knock out between 7 and 9 Germans on July 27 near Lillory. As the front in Normandy collapsed near Saint-Lô, Marshal Kluge, commander-in-chief in the west, tried to raise divisions to meet the Allied breakout. These included the 2nd Panzer Division and the 116th Panzer Division, which were located southeast of the American attack. These attacks had been anticipated by the Americans, and they were able to send large formations of fighter bombers and bombers against the German reinforcements, which were finally contained by the men of the American 2nd Armored Divisions. In any case, the German counterattack carried out on July 28 and 31 did serve to reorient the attacking Allied forces in a southwesterly direction towards the city of Avranches. By August 1, this being the exact moment of the final Allied breakout at Avranches, the American Third Army was active and was placed under the command of Pat. The order he received was to begin exploiting the breach they had just made and begin advancing through the interior of France as quickly as possible. As the Allies began to sneak into the German rear, the German High Command began to drop plans to correct the situation. The strategy they finally opted for was to counterattack in the direction with all the armored divisions that were present in Normandy, with the intention of closing the Allied raid. However, after the recent British operation in the vicinity of the city of Caen and the American offensive that we have just seen, the German armored divisions were completely depleted. By August 3, Patton had already reached the city of Rennes and was a few kilometers away from occupying the entire region of Brittany and reaching the banks of the Loire River. Although the German generals in Normandy advocated a retreat towards the Seine River, or even to the original border of Germany, Hitler insisted on attacking Avranches to try to reconsolidate a new front in Normandy. The plan was known as Operation Luttich, and a series of units grouped together at full speed participated with a very limited offensive capacity. Despite the protests of the German generals involved, the German counterattack began on August 7, and in just 24 hours it became clear that they would not be able to achieve their objective. As if that were not enough, on August 8, the British launched Operation Totalize south of Caen, in which almost 600 tanks began to advance towards Falaise. With the Americans already at Le Mans, it became increasingly evident that the German units attempting to close the gap between Avranches and Mortagne were going to be completely isolated. But although it was evident that the German units west of Falaise were going to be surrounded, Hitler did not give the order to withdraw until August 16, by which time the Germans were almost surrounded. The Falaise pocket was completely closed on August 21, and some 50,000 German soldiers were trapped in it, who could not form part of the new German defensive line in the so-called Siegfried Lane. And that was, in a very summary way, how the Battle of Normandy ended at the end of August 1944.